sometimes I need a break. Amen. Not all the time I need a break. Take your break. Hallelujah. I remember when God tells some people to take their break. Amen.
Thank you, Lord.
They get so caught up in the work, they don't want to stop working. But y'all didn't know you need a break sometimes. They had to tell me. Well, I take it on this end, I took it on that end. Because I understand the importance of a break. Hallelujah. How many understand the importance of a break? Hallelujah. Glory to God. And Sunday is our break. Not that we don't do for God all week, but Sunday is when we come together. When we worship God for all God has done and all God is doing. And we take a break for a moment. Hallelujah. Before we go back to our own homes and our own places and begin to deal with the stuff all over again. Amen. But God gives us a break. Aren't you glad for your break? Come on, somebody. Ah, yeah. Man, ready to work. Huh? Can't do it back. Need that break. Yes. Amen. Amen. Can we turn today just for a moment to Philippians 4 and verse 19? Good to see our sister Veronica back. She's been across the pond visiting David. A vacation. Somebody told me she was thinking about staying. And I told her, baby, thought she could get on back here. Trying to come back. And we're glad that she enjoyed herself. We're glad that she made it back safely. Amen. That's a blessing. Amen. Amen. Philippians 4, verse 19. You have it, say amen. Amen. And it reads, and my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. God shall supply. God shall supply. You know, when President Obama the first election, he inherited a broken economy and a broken banking system that was stealing, actually. They were stealing from the American public. And, you know, through these bogus mortgages that were given to people who could not afford them, which led to a rash of people losing their homes and filing bankruptcy in order to keep what little they had left. The country had to bail them out. They had to bail out the financial institutions, and they put regulations in place so that would not happen again. However, the current president is busy removing regulations. And I suspect we'll find ourselves back in the same situation where we were before. The deregulation of these agencies are making the rich richer. And although they are throwing pennies at the masses, they are amassing millions upon millions of dollars. And it's us. We're the ones that stand to lose. Are you with me? And although the president likes to take credit for the decrease in the unemployment rate, and also he likes to take credit for the increase in the economy. Economist says that the economy has been increasing for the last 8 years. Are you with me? Which would mean that it is not his success, but the success of our former president, President Obama. We should be credited with the success of the economy. However, the economy continues to do well. If it continues to do well or not, it seems to be the people in the middle, what we call the middle class. Those people with a household income of $40,000 to $110,000. They're the ones that catch the brunt of the taxes and the brunt of the increases. The middle class makes up about half of the American population. And it is the middle class that is carrying the country on their backs. They pay the most taxes by percentage-wise, and they get practically no return for the money. They're even talking about taking away the deduction for your property taxes. Amen. Right now, the middle class is having a tough time. They're struggling while being taxed, sending their children to colleges and having to pay these exorbitant tuitions, which leaves a lot of families in debt for quite some time. The American public who will have to struggle through hard times. And yes, God is making a way for us. And we are getting by. We're making ends meet with what we have. The average Joe Schmo. I don't want to be what they call a Debbie Downer, but I believe it's going to be more difficult to make those ends meet with what we make. Are you with me? I don't know about you, but I feel the pinch. Do you? Anybody else feel the pinch? Gas prices make me feel the pinch. Are you with me? We're spending more money to get where we have to go. Property taxes have also gone up, and we feel the pinch with that also. I'm also concerned about the fluctuation, and y'all stay with me for a minute, about the fluctuation of the stock markets. One day they're at record highs, the next day they're at record lows. To me, that seems unstable when you keep going up and down. And I'm not trying to frighten anyone, and I'm not trying to start a panic, but when the prophet sees danger coming, it is the prophet's responsibility to warn the people. Are you with me? So we may want to cut back on some of our extravagances and be more frugal in our spending. Are you with me? You know, we have to tighten our belts and do what we can to make it through these times. We'll get through it, and we'll come out all right. God will make a way for his people. He always makes a way for his people. Turn to somebody and say, God shall provide. God shall provide. I believe it's in 2 Corinthians 4 and 8, and I heard Brother Deacon Benders talk about it this morning. He said, we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. We are cast down, but not destroyed. So yes, we experience difficult times, but we are not in distress. We are not in despair. We are not forsaken or destroyed because of the God that we serve. Are you with me? He's the God that blesses our portion and increases it. Are you with me? He's the God that causes our jar of oil or our canister of meal to continue to yield its contents. He's the God that gives us favor, and sometimes favor is better than money. Are you with me? Come on, somebody. These are testing times, which calls us to task, to prove that in which we believe. And I admonish you today to hold on to that in which you believe, and and don't let go of your faith. See, God has allowed us to be here in this time and in this season, in this space, in this time where racism seems to be running rampant, in this time where the opioid addiction is reaching catastrophic proportion. In this time, amen, where there is a great falling away in the church. And it seems that there is no God consciousness in the world. But in the midst of all this happening in our world, in the midst of all that's happening in our families, in the midst of all that's happening in our community, I hear the scripture text telling us today from Philippians 4:19 that my God shall supply all of your need according to his riches in glory. In spite of it all, God shall supply. Paul was writing to the church at Philippi. This church had been one of the few, and perhaps the only one that supported him during his ministry. And this support was unsolicited. They saw a need in Paul's life, and they reacted to that need. They reached out to meet that need in Paul's life. And Paul responded, amen, to them by telling them that God would supply their needs. Amen. Because of everything they had done, that God would make sure that everything that they needed would be poured out upon them because of their generosity, because of their benevolence, because of their care. God would continue to pour out to them what they needed. Paul wanted them to understand that God's generosity, amen, could far exceed anything that they had done, and also that God's generosity poured out of eternity. Are you with me? Yes. In other words, there was no ending to God's generosity. There's no ending to his substance. There's no ending to his blessings. But they pour out of eternity. Like Malachi tells us to bring our tithes into the storehouse and see when God open up the windows of heaven and pour us out a blessing that there will not be room enough to receive. That in eternity there is no bankruptcy, but there is only plenty. Amen. Are you with me? Paul knew that there was no ending to God's generosity. I believe it's in Hebrews 6:10 where it reads, "For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have showed toward his name, in that ye have ministered to the saints and do minister." See, God will not forget what you've done for the saints. And not only the saints, but for those in need. Amen. God will not forget. Amen. And I say all of this to say that in these dark times, God will supply the harvest. Yes. That in these uncertain times, that God will supply the harvest. Yes. Amen. In these times when you seem that you can't go forward, but being pushed backwards, God will supply the harvest. Amen. God will supply all your needs from his abundant riches and glory. People will look at you and be astonished and wonder how you're making it. But there you just take a praise break right there and say, it's because of the grace of God. It's because of his unmerited favor. It's because of his eternal riches that I'm making it in this world. I wish I had a praising church in here on today. Turn to them and say, God is supplying my need. I remember one time when I bought Audi. I was working for the county. And I was in a parking lot that day, and for some reason, I stayed later and my boss came out. And he looked at my car and he said, "How'd you get that?" And I said, "Just like you did." Because he failed to understand it wasn't what he was giving me that was supplying my need. Yeah, he gave me a salary, but I had a boss above him that was supplying my need according to his riches and glory. Not according to the county budget, but according to his riches, which far exceeded the county budget. People will be astonished and look at you and wonder how you're making. But tell them God is supplying my need. When all common sense said you should be going under. When it said you should be going under, but you continue to stand. You continue to prosper. God is supplying your need. You have to realize today that it's God that's keeping us standing. Amen. Realize that God is keeping us in the midst of trouble. When you're wondering how your paycheck is stretching to pay everything that you need to pay. Remember that God is supplying your need according to his riches and glory. And if I would call a witness today, I would call a woman who's simply known as the wife of a prophet. Her story is found in 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, beginning around the first verse. And it talks about this woman. It said, "Now a certain woman cried of the wives of the sons of the prophet unto Elijah. And she said, Thy servant my husband is dead. And thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord. And the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondmen, to be slaves. And Elijah said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in thy house? And she said, Thy handmaid hath not anything in the house, save a pot of oil. And he said, Go borrow thee vessels abroad from all your neighbors, even empty vessels. Borrow not a few. In other words, don't come back here with 2 or 3. If God pours out of eternity, you're going to need more than 2 or 3. Are you with me? You're going to need more than 4 or 5. You're going to need more than 6 or 7. You're going to need more than 8 or 9. You're going to need more than 10 or 11. You're going to need more than 12 or 13 or 14 or 15 or 16 or 17. He said, Go borrow as many as you can get. Doesn't that show us that the windows of heaven are open and God is pouring out upon his people? He knows our need and he will supply our need. Tell somebody, God shall supply our need. He said, Don't borrow not a few. And he said, When thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels. And thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she did what he said. She went in. She borrowed as many vessels as she could borrow. She shut the door upon her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she began to pour into the vessels. She only had 1 jar, remember? As she said, we only have a jar of oil. But when she began to pour out of that jar, the vessels began to fill up. 1 filled up, 2 filled up, 3 filled up, 4 filled up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. It doesn't say how many she had, but every one she had filled up. And when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, bring me some more vessels. And he said unto her, we don't have any more. That's the last one. And her jar of oil was still full. And all the other vessels was full. And then she came and told the man of God. And he said, now go sell all those vessels that you filled up with oil and pay the debt. And live thou and thy children of the rest. In other words, I'm giving you enough to pay your debts. And I'm giving you enough for you to live on. God is supplying her needs. God will give you what you need. God will give you out of eternity what you need. I don't know if y'all have ever experienced you needed something. Didn't know where it was coming from. Didn't know how it was coming. And all of a sudden it's there. In your hand. In your pocket. In your bank account. Hallelujah. Anybody ever experienced that? Y'all didn't know that was God supplying your need. You needed a place to stay. You were about to get evicted. Amen. But God stepped in and gave you a place to live. Are you with me? You lost your job. Didn't know where you were going to get another one. And God opened a door. And you stepped right in and began to make more money than you made before. Your boss told you that he couldn't do anything for you any longer. Amen. Amen. But you prayed unto God, and God opened a door and made ways out of no way. Amen. God shall supply your need. Do I have anybody in the building with some needs today? Come on, if you have some needs, I want you to turn to your neighbors and neighbor. You know, I got some needs that I need God to attend to. I'm here to tell you that the scripture says this morning that God shall supply all that you need, all of your need, all that you need. God is going to give it to you according to his riches in Christ Jesus. Yes. Economic times may be hard, but God will supply your need. Yes. New Jersey is becoming the state with the highest price gas in the country. But how many know that God will supply your needs? Heating fuel. After gas, heating fuel goes up. But how many know that God will supply your need? It won't be too much for God to handle. He will supply your need. And when I begin to ponder all of this that's happening in our country and all over the world, I begin to hear Habakkuk in the Spirit. When he wrote in the 3rd chapter where he said, although the fig tree shall not blossom, and neither shall the fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flocks shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herds in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I'm going to take my break. Although there's nothing in the field, although the folds are cut off, although the substance is gone, there's no fruit on the vine, the olives have failed, I'm going to take my break and rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation, because the Lord is my strength. Amen. And he will make my feet like hinds feet. Amen. That means I can stand, amen, on the unstable surface. Amen. When things get steep, I can still stand. When things get rugged, I can still stand. When things get shaky, I can still stand because God makes my feet like hinds feet and will make me to walk upon the high places. Amen. So although everything is designed to take me down, God will cause me to walk in the high places because he shall supply my needs. Amen. How many looking for God to supply your need today? Grab somebody by the hand, look them in their eyes, because they might have been afraid to tell you that they had a need, because sometimes you're ashamed of stuff like that. Amen. But sometimes how many know that we need to say to each other, I need something. Come on, somebody. Come on. If you can't do nothing but pray for me, that's better than doing nothing. You can pray for my need. Amen. And God will come in and work what you have gathered in his name. He said, I'll be in the midst of them, whatever you ask in prayer and faithfully, and I'll give it to you. Amen. God shall supply all your needs. All of it. No matter what it is, no matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like, God shall supply all your needs. There is nothing too hard for him. How many know what I'm talking about? Glory to God. Cancer's not too hard. Hallelujah. Glory to God. AIDS is not too hard. Diabetes is not too hard for him. Are you with me? God can supply all our need according to his riches in glory. He'll be a doctor in the sick room. Amen. When your health care has run out. Are you with me? Glory to God. He'll be a lawyer in the courtroom when you can't find legal representation. Amen. Are you with me? He'll be a friend when you're friendless, and he'll be a hope when you're hopeless. He shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory. Hallelujah. He poured out of eternity to supply us with that which we need. We just got to believe it. We just have to trust him. We just have to lean on him. And he'll make ways out of nowhere. He will open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing that there will not be room enough to receive. God will do it. Hallelujah. We have to trust him. How many trust him today? God shall supply all they need. That's the message for this morning. God shall supply all your needs. There is nothing too hard for him. Hallelujah. I've had good days. I've had hills to climb. I've had weary days and some sleepless nights. But when I look around and I think things over, all of my good days outweighs my bad days. I won't complain. Sometimes the clouds hang low. I can hardly see the road. I ask the question, Lord, Lord, why but He knows what's best for me. Although my weary eyes, they can't see,